I've mentioned so far hold a candle to what we're currently dealing with at work, in the classrooms, and at home. You've probably already guessed what I'm talking about. It's AI. It's by far the most significant source of cognitive offloading that we've ever had to reckon with, and so far, the consequences are already deeply troubling. In a recent interview, Sam Altman suggested that one day soon, intelligence would be a resource you would need to pay for, just like water, gas, and electricity. The key word here is need. The idea that critical thinking will become an essential tool that exists outside of your brain is something that we've never had to contend with. But that future could very well be staring us right in the face. One of the clearest examples of this is in our current education system. It's safe to say that LLMs like ChatGPT have pretty much rendered the current school system obsolete. If ChatGPT can write all the essays, do all the research papers, correctly answer all the math homework, all in a way that's becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish from human written work, what exactly will be left for the kids to learn? When we learn to write well, we're feeling our way through an argument. We're thinking in a sophisticated way, which is only possible on paper. The student who gets an LLM to write their paper is missing out on this cognitive development. They're outsourcing their thinking altogether. And let's face it, they're probably not doing a robust editing job. In a study conducted by MIT, researchers compared 3 groups of students. One used their brain to write an essay while another group used an LLM. Over the course of 4 months, the LLM users underperformed significantly at neural, linguistic, and scoring tests. They also remembered much less information from the papers that they wrote compared to the people who did it on their own. Ultimately, when we offload the writing process to AI, we lose what we used to gain from it: critical thinking skills and the information that came from the writing process itself. In an educational environment, that doesn't exactly make a whole lot of sense. Some have argued that the students are learning how to prompt. Ugh. But to me, that's like saying you're learning how to use a smartphone. It's a tool designed for everyone to use without thinking. Let's not act like you need a degree to get ChatGPT to do whatever you want it to, please. The amount of thinking you have to do when writing your prompts is limited, and theoretically should be reduced over time by the advancement of AI. The challenges in prompting that supposedly have to be overcome will likely be eased or eliminated in a future update. These students will eventually take this absence of critical thinking into the workplace. That is, if AI has left any room for entry-level jobs by then. In the workplace, there's a greater emphasis on outcomes over process, which is a big reason AI works perfectly for most white-collar roles. But I think we run into many problems when we think of work in this limited way. Just as the student doesn't absorb the information from their essays, neither do workers intake the work they put into an AI to do for them. Now, you might be asking, why is that a problem? It effectively makes one useless at communicating their work to others. If what they produce requires explanation, well, that is a problem. That same worker also has a worse understanding of the industry that they work in. They won't internalize the needs of their clients, sending emails written by AI. The less you engage with your work, the less it becomes a part of you. Now, this all assumes that work is good to begin with. Which brings us to an unfortunate new trend plaguing employees everywhere: work slop. If you work in an office, you may have already experienced this. A coworker gives you something to review. Let's say it's a public-facing email. You start reading it and the writing is pretty good. But slowly you start to get a strange feeling. So the individual sentences make sense, but the whole thing put together feels strange, like something is missing. The writing feels absent-mindedly put together. It's as if you weren't receiving human communication, just something imitating it. So you wonder if you're the problem. Maybe stress is lowering your ability to comprehend it. So you go to the writer to ask some questions about it, but they're unable to answer. Eventually, they finally admit that they used AI to write it. They're oddly not even ashamed of that fact. You then have to rewrite the email almost completely, wasting hours that you didn't plan to spend doing this. This is a typical work slop scenario. What should strike you right away is the lack of critical thinking on display. Workers across the country are assuming it's okay to trust an LLM to do their work and not even bothering reviewing it afterwards. Editing the AI output requires a lot of time, even more than simply writing it yourself in some cases. Therefore, the editing process quickly gets cut if workers are looking to save time or if there's pressure for time. And this behavior is reinforced by upper management, who typically love AI and want their employees to use it so they can justify cutting human labor or possibly increasing productivity overall. You may be wondering how so many people in higher positions can lower their standards for acceptable work. Quality work has historically been a virtue in the workplace, especially when it's for the public. Well, that brings us back to groupthink. The working world has almost universally embraced AI regardless of its perceived shortcomings. Countless companies are pivoting to AI. Even Allbirds Shoes, that was almost bankrupt, is apparently now an AI company, and their stock shot up 600% simply because they changed their name to Bird AI or something stupid like that. They have no product, no service, nothing of value, they just changed their name. Your superiors will expect you to find ways to make your work more efficient with AI, even if there is no obvious way or you have already demonstrated that it's not helpful. To say anything negative about AI in the workplace is a big faux pas, or at least it's a sensitive subject when you have to tiptoe around it. Otherwise, you may be categorized by your peers as a Luddite who's holding the company back. The eyes of your peers will all turn white as they stare at you in unison and, okay, you get it. But the reality is, you will likely face consequences for demonstrating critical thinking about AI. The pressures of groupthink push for conformity on the issue. That's why even when people bring up criticisms, they usually couch it by opening with, "Look, I'm not against AI, but..." And that's even in light of strong evidence that AI isn't really providing much value. Another report from MIT suggests that 95% of organizations are not finding any measurable return on their investments in AI. Meanwhile, companies like Amazon are laying people off under the assumption that AI will improve productivity. Its employees, however, aren't finding good results with the new tools. Many suggest it's actually adding to their workload when they have to clean up code slop, for example. Then there's the fact that workers feel like they're training AI to replace them, which is obviously hugely demoralizing. The whole AI project just seems short-sighted at every turn. If the tools improve and are legitimately able to replace enormous amounts of workers, then who will companies try to sell to? What impact would that have on the overall economy? If we have mass unemployment without some form of universal basic income, what kind of world will that be? And as less and less of work is actually being done by humans, why would a business need anyone? Why would we then need specific businesses? Would it not eventually whittle down to one master AI? Is that the ultimate goal? Just the end of monopoly with your weird uncle finally having enough and flipping the table over? There's a lot of existential questions AI raises that the thought leaders in the space only really give a passing thought to. And when they do consider them, it's possible they're just trying to excite investors by flouting the enormous potential AI has, even if that potential is in fact horrifying. In a few different ways, I think we've been